greatest risk of snow, some disruption due to that snow through Wednesday, with it building up at lower levels, 2 to 5 centimetres, 5 to 10 centimetres, if not more, over the hills. There'll also be some showers running down the east coast of England and affecting Northern Ireland. These are mostly rain with some hill snow mixed in. Elsewhere across the UK, maybe chilly, but it's bright blue skies, crisp winter sunshine and temperatures at around 5 or 6 in the south, 3 or 4 further north. Although over higher parts of Scotland with that snow setting in, it's going to be very cold, and through Thursday, early hours, temperatures in some spots dipping into the minus double digits. But a widespread frost nevertheless across the UK, around some western coasts where we keep showers going, as well as the east coast, some icy patches to start off Thursday. And in sheltered spots, temperatures getting down to -6, -7 Celsius, if not lower. Then as we begin Thursday, there are some areas of rain, sleet and snow around, one pushing into parts of North Wales, into northern England and the North Midlands, could bring some settling snow for a time. And the snow showers continue for the north of Scotland as well. In between, plenty of sunshine, but staying cold into the weekend.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Busy show tonight. It's Mark Dolan in for the great Mark Steyn. With tragic child deaths from Strep A directly linked to lockdowns and with worrying statistics in the BMJ about the vaccine and young people, is the COVID consensus beginning to crumble? I'll ask top analyst and number cruncher Ivor Cummins. Everyone's on strike, the country's broke, and our institutions are riven with toxic political correctness. Is Britain in long-term decline? I'll ask top historian Dr. David Starkey live in the studio. As police escort Just Stop Oil protesters and laugh and joke with them all along the way, what can be done about woke policing? We'll speak to no-nonsense former top cop and head of Royal Protection Di Davies, who makes the coppers in the Sweeney look positively gentle. And in my monologue, I'm not pulling my punches, folks, the city of Oxford goes full communist. We've got reaction from freedom-loving campaigner Lois Perry. I'll see you after the headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Downing Street has declined to reveal if the Prime Minister is worried about patients dying due to NHS strikes. That's after GMB, Unison and Unite unions announced that thousands of ambulance workers and other NHS staff will walk out across England and Wales on the 21st and 28th of December. They say the government is ignoring workers' pleas for a decent pay rise. However, the Health Secretary says unions' demands are not affordable. One Kassab is National Lead Officer at Unite. He says patients' lives are already at risk.
Only 25% of shifts have the planned staff actually on that shift. There are 133,000 vacancies across the NHS in England alone. And what our members are telling us is that lives are being put at risk now and that people are dying now because of the state of the service.
Baroness Mone is to take a leave of absence from the House of Lords following allegations that she benefited from a COVID PPE deal. It's alleged that Michelle Mone and her children received millions of pounds after she recommended a company to ministers at the height of the pandemic. Baroness Mone has denied the allegations. Stephen Flynn has been elected as the SNP's leader in Westminster. The Aberdeen South MP replaces Ian Blackford with immediate effect. First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has congratulated Mr Flynn after his win. He'll appear at PMQ's questioning Rishi Sunak for the first time tomorrow. The Health Secretary has told the House of Commons that we're seeing an earlier peak in Strep A cases than usual, but there is no new strain. At least 9 children have died from the bacterial infection in the UK since September. The latest is a 5-year-old from Belfast. The government says antibiotics could be given to children at schools affected by Strep A as a preventative measure. 7 more cases of diphtheria have been recorded among migrants in England, taking the total for this year to 57. The UK Health Security Agency says they were discovered between November 28th and December 4th. It marks an increase from the previous week, where only 5 new cases were found. Last week, the Immigration Minister told MPs that asylum seekers with diphtheria symptoms would be put into isolation. And a man has been arrested on suspicion of common assault during a walkabout by King Charles in Luton. Bedfordshire police say the suspect, aged in his 20s, was arrested after an egg was thrown in the direction of the monarch. King Charles was seen being guided away from the crowds by his security team following that incident. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is the People's Channel, GB News. Back now to Mark.
The state's war on the public continues apace. Oxfordshire County Council have approved plans to lock residents into one of 6 zones to save the planet from global warming, or that's how they frame it. The latest stage in the 15-minute city agenda is to place electronic gates on key roads in and out of the city, confining residents to their own neighbourhoods. Under the new scheme, if residents want to leave their zone, then they'll have to get permission from the council, who get to decide who's worthy of freedom and who isn't. Chairman Mao, eat your heart out. Residents will be allowed to leave their zone a maximum of 100 days per year. But in order to gain even this, every resident will have to register their car details, with the council deciding how they're going to move and when via cameras around the city. So if you're a struggling single mother trying to take your kids to school before getting to work, you won't be covered. Tough luck, dear. Take the bus. Or balance yourself and your 3 kids on an e-bike. Oxford City Council, led by a Labour, Lib Dem and Green coalition from hell, are to turn one of the most enlightened locations on earth, home to Oxford University, whose alma mater include John Cleese, Professor Stephen Hawking, Oscar Wilde and Margaret Thatcher, into an outpost of communist China. Councillor Louise Upton, Cabinet Member for Health and Transport at Oxford City Council, has admitted this trial is a nudge to change the way locals travel. Meanwhile, commentator Bernie Spofforth has pointed out that nudge policy is set to be enshrined in law by the House of Lords. Take a look at this. In our hands, behaviour change for climate and environmental goals. Absolutely terrifying. Remember all the nudging during COVID, which saw us locked up, muzzled and unable to bury the dead? Well, there you have it, folks. As predicted by so-called conspiracy theorists who are fast becoming soothsayers and arbiters of truth, COVID lockdowns are to be replaced with climate lockdowns. It's not surprising that this brainchild has come from the political left, because socialism is all about controlling people, controlling their labour, controlling their money and controlling their lives. Forget about no free movement now that we're out of the European Union. We haven't even got free movement on our own shores. It doesn't help, and it's a cruel irony, that the allegedly freedom-loving Conservative Party set this hell train in motion under Boris Johnson, who dares to call himself a libertarian, an egregious breach of the Trades Descriptions Act. By showing totalitarian zealots a bit of leg by setting the precedent of COVID lockdowns, we've given bureaucrats an inch and now they're taking a mile. When Boris Johnson asked us to stay home to save the NHS and promised it was 3 weeks to flatten the curve, that was the moment the genie escaped the lamp. Well, it ain't going back in. Perhaps now people will wake up when they get a fine for driving their car down the wrong street, one which is not in their approved movement zone. Mark my words, this is only going to get worse. The state has become our master, and dare I say it, our abuser. After all, what's the first thing an abuser does? Controls your movements, tracking your every move. Physical freedom is the ultimate hill to die on. If we're not free, life is not worth living. And these days, it's increasingly not worth living in high-tax Britain at all. Probably rather be in Beijing or Pyongyang. At least there, you get the full communist experience. The state has overplayed its hand in the last 2.5 years, creating a miserable, divided and poorer society. We need less government, not more. And that's going to be the next political battleground. In fact, I might buy a sauna, switch to a full carnivore diet and buy a few outdoor heaters just to send the message that I won't be controlled. People aren't stupid. People aren't ignorant, and people are not irresponsible. If you give the public information about energy, for example, or the environment, there's no doubt that most will, by choice, act accordingly. When the horrors of battery-farmed hens emerged in the 80s and 90s, millions of Brits opted for free range, by choice, and the price came down. No one minds recycling, and we all save money by owning energy-efficient appliances, whether it's a dishwasher or a car. But as we saw with autocratic lockdowns and vaccine tyranny, if you make people do things, if it's stick, not carrot, the policy backfires. All it does is radicalise the most compliant of citizens. Well, here's hoping it does. The state needs to back off and get the hell out of our lives. This latest attack on cars is a test case for human liberty, and it's driving me round the bend. What's your view? GB Views at gbnews.uk. Reacting to that is the freedom-loving Lois Perry of Car 26. I hate to say we told you so, right?
I know. Actually, somebody put on Twitter earlier, when I first heard Lois speaking about stuff on GB News and other channels, I thought she was a bit mad. I thought it was a bit
crazy.
A bit crazy, a bit too much.
Tinfoil hat.
Absolutely, all of the above.
Flat earther.
That one, everything. But the tweet said, actually, now everything she's saying is coming true. So it's nice of him to say that. But I actually wish that it wasn't coming true. I wish that I was completely insane and we weren't going down this totalitarian route, which clearly we are. I did a tweet yesterday, which Oxford City Council responded to with this awful 1970s style animated video telling me why it was so fantastic that people would be confined to their zones. Yeah. And it's just absolute insanity. I mean, are we in a 1980s film that's set in the future about a dystopia? Were they telling us what was going to happen? Because we've got districts now. Like all of the films, whether it be Blade Runner, Total Recall, they all had districts, didn't they? And that's what we've got now. Ping, 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 you've left your district. And once there's electric cars, the car will just stop.
Yeah.
It will just stop. There won't be any getting a fine in the post, £80, if you leave your zone more than twice a week.
No.
The car will just stop.
Smart cars, smart motorways, smart roads. It's an assault on human liberty, isn't it? And as I've mentioned, this is a hill to die on. How ironic that this should happen in Oxford, which is, of course, the location of Oxford University, one of the great sort of focal points of Western enlightenment and Western ideas, liberal ideas.
Absolutely, which is why I believe it's been targeted. I mean, it's quite well documented and quite well known that the Chinese Communist Party makes huge donations to top universities and actually pays for whole colleges. Some of them are completely owned by the CCP now. So no, I'm not surprised at all. Actually, they go for the intellectual centres and they go for the power centres. Yeah. So yeah, we're in bed with them now. Jeremy Hunt's married to somebody who gets a cheque every week from the CCP. Welcome to dystopia. Here we are.
A man who spoke admiringly of China's lockdown policies.
Pulling people out of their homes and putting them in re-education centres. No, sorry. Camps. No, what were they called?
Oh yes, these
quarantines.
Quarantine.
That's right.
It's a polite word for it.
Yeah.
And it is a concern, and it all originates, ironically, from a supposedly freedom-loving Conservative government and Boris Johnson. He's no libertarian. The bottom line is that he talks a good game, but we set a precedent when we shut the country down for 3 weeks. Yeah. My sources told me that Number 10 were amazed how compliant the public were at the time.
So was I.
Right. Well, we all somehow we yielded to that principle of 3 weeks to flatten the curve. What was it? Squash the sombrero. But we were had, and that was the point of no return, wasn't it?
It was the point of no return.
It took 3 weeks to destroy Britain, really.
It did, because the thing is, as Brits, we are pushed and we're pushed and we're pushed and we're pushed, and it takes quite a lot for us to snap. But when we do, I think we'll do quite dramatically. But Boris Johnson, he is what people want him to be. He's a libertarian or he's not. He was pro-Brexit and anti-Brexit. He even wrote 2 leaders, didn't he, for the Telegraph?
He did, yeah.
He is whatever you want him to be.
Yeah, he can't even decide which woman he's in love with, let's be honest.
Well, quite, well, there you go.
Well, maybe he's quietened down since Carrie,
Well, that's not what... Yeah, okay.
The bottom line is... that's not what you thought.
I didn't say it.
Well, I saw him in the street the other day and I caught his gaze, I can't lie. But listen, Boris is ancient history now. We are where we are.
His dad isn't. And his dad was recently on GB News talking about how it's all part of the plan, that we will no longer fly or drive or eat meat. And actually, you referred to Bernie from Bernie's tweets thing, talking about the House of Lords report, which Mark Steyn and I discussed was the plan. And it's very sinister. I mean, when you and I talk about the whole COVID thing, the lessons of COVID, we're thinking the bad lessons, the bad things. They're saying the lessons of COVID as if it's the best thing ever. I mean, Lance Foreman did a tweet earlier on about how he's going through it and about them talking about like doing 20 miles an hour to put people off driving. Nothing to do with safety, because it actually increases the emissions if you drive more slowly.
Well, whether it's the peddling of trans ideology, whether it's the very divisive and contested idea of critical race theory, whether it's woke institutions, I think that it's not until the public wake up that things will change. But my problem is that by the time most ordinary people have realised the extent to which there's been an assault on their freedoms, I think by then it's too late.
Yes and no. I mean, you've got the Tories and the Labour Party, which are both globalist, technocratic regimes now. There is almost only one government. So you have to look at maybe the smaller parties. I mean, I am apolitical, but the only political party that's talking about confronting net zero and ending the ICE vehicle ban is the Reform Party, led by Richard Tice. So, as I say, I'm not endorsing any particular party, but that is the only party at the moment that seems to have an alternative view.
And this policy that's happening in Oxford, it's going to pop up in cities across the country.
If the Oxford people allow this, it will go absolutely everywhere. And you'll have a ridiculous situation of living on one road that borders another road, not in your area, and you'll have to drive all the way out of the city round a ring road, if you're lucky, if they allow it, to go into the next street in your car. It's insanity. But as you say, it tested us for COVID. Now it's climate. This is what I said was going to happen. I wish I was wrong. I really do, but I'm not, unfortunately.
There you go. Well, listen, Lois, a thrill to have you on the programme. We'll definitely catch up soon. Lots more to come. Is the COVID narrative beginning to tumble like a house of cards? I'll speak to top engineer and number cruncher Ivor Cummins, who is something of a YouTube sensation. Also, no-nonsense ex-cop Di Davies on whether we'll ever see an end to woke policing. You won't believe the story I've got for you shortly. But next, is Britain in long-term decline? I'll be asking legendary historian Dr. David Starkey live in the studio. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GBNews. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instinct was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's Mark Dolan in for the boss, Mark Steyn, tonight, tomorrow and Thursday. Lots to get through. Is the COVID narrative tumbling like a house of cards? Bad news on vaccine safety in the BMJ today. And also, we'll be talking about the dreadful infections to children, 9 casualties now. And health professionals have linked what's happening to the lockdowns. We'll get to that very, very shortly. Plus woke policing with former head of Royal Protection, Di Davies. But first, your emails, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And Adam says, Mark, you need permission to leave your area because checks notes, wokester scaremongering. I don't remember the angry truant telling us we'd need to show our papers to move around a free country. Adam there responding to my monologue about the fact that Oxford City have gone completely communist, controlling the number of days per year that locals can drive their car. Welcome to hell. Roland says, Mark, in time, we are definitely heading towards climate lockdowns. You won't be allowed to leave your district and you'll be called a citizen, but not much more. Robert, genuinely frightening news. We need PR in council elections to stop this kind of policy. I'll get to more of your thoughts shortly. But not so long ago, within the lifetime of a few older folks alive today, the buildings behind me legislated for a quarter of the planet. But as Britain braces itself for a winter of discontent, with our budget statement now needing sign-off from Rolex-wearing international financiers and speculators, what went wrong? With a woke takeover of our great institutions, peddling divisive identity politics, cancel culture, contested ideas like critical race theory and gender ideology, does Britain face an existential threat, mired in low productivity, with businesses, households and the state creaking under the weight of their own debt? Just what is the future for Blighty? I'm ever the optimist, you know that. I love this country. But is the Telegraph's Sherelle Jacobs right in her latest piece this week, when she says, with no plans to improve its resilience, Britain is heading for systems collapse? Everyone's on strike, the NHS is broken and we're skint. Where do we go from here? Well, to find the answer, let's look to the past. I'm delighted to welcome legendary historian Dr. David Starkey, who is now tonight allowing me to call him David. Hi, David.
Hello, Mark. May I should say Mr. Dolan.
Well, there you go. That's about all I've got in terms of titles and formalities. I'm not a doctor just yet, but I will examine you. David, let's talk about this. To what extent can the past tell us about the future?
Well, you began talking about Parliament, the thing that's behind there. I think that the peculiar thing about England, Britain, the reason we ruled a quarter of the globe. Churchill, at the beginning of the First World War, do we all remember Churchill, you know? Goody Churchill, not baddie Churchill. He takes a young man into the chamber of the House of Commons. This is when it seemed the world was falling to pieces. Again, 1914. The chamber's empty, it's quiet, it's dark. And he says to this boy, this is why we will win. That sense of the right of national self-government, of representative government, which, remember, runs right through from the aftermath of Magna Carta to now. What's gone wrong is that. That building is where it's gone wrong. That building is where it can be put right. And the history of that building, I think, tells us how it can be put right.
And how does that building, how does Parliament become rehabilitated constitutionally and in the esteem of the public?
Well, remember, we were, I think, all on the same side over Brexit. We made a mistake. We assumed that the threat to Parliament's sovereignty, the threat to its functionality, came from the European Union. Yes, to an extent it did, but the real enemies are here. some of the enemies you listed. Let's just take a particular instance, something that we all recognise is completely mad and is absurd. Why cannot Britain shift a collection of, I hesitate to use the right word, middle class, the word begins with W, who are eco-protesters, who are determined to stop everybody. You were talking about people being enclosed in their neighbourhoods. How can 5 or 6 silly people hold the entire country to ransom by closing the M25? 2 things. The Supreme Court had a strange case called the Ziegler case, in which it determined that although the 1981 Act governing road usage says it is an offence to block the road, in certain cases, do you know what? Parliament made a mistake. It's not an offence. Secondly, we have a funny thing. Have you heard of the College of Policing?
No.
The College of Policing is what actually determines how the police operate. Do you know what? It's a limited liability company quango. This is the thing that determined, because I had offended somebody or another, I had committed a non-crime hate-related incident. It's the College of Policing that says that the police have to go through 5 stages before they can actually remove a road protester. You ask them politely first. Then you say, is there anything you can do for it? You go through this absurd routine. So we've 2 things. We've deliberately curtailed parliamentary sovereignty through an aggressive judiciary. Secondly, we've created quangos, which are staffed by the believers in that world that you pinpointed brilliantly, the world of woke, the world that nothing must be done.
And these quangos, these middlemen and women, they're an extension of the blob, I suppose.
They run everything. We're stupid enough to blame poor Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng for the financial catastrophe we're in. We're not. They are not the... They have a marginal responsibility. The fundamental responsibility is the quango called the Bank of England. The disaster of COVID is due to the fact that Parliament abdicated its responsibilities to a single-issue committee called SAGE. Everything we're now learning about SAGE is a disaster. If you say to a group of scientists who are specialists in epidemiology, you've got to tell us what to do, they will say, oh, we mustn't have anybody dying. If it involves shutting the entire country down. And wherever you look, we've handed power away from us. We've handed power away from Parliament. We've got seriously to learn to take it back. Because finally, do you know what? Parliament is about the only body, elected representatives, about the only people who haven't been taken over by woke.
And is there a historical example or precedent for this kind of woke takeover of Britain?
Well, yes, there was. It's called the Puritan Revolution of the middle of the 17th century. They're exactly the same. The ones who want to abolish, a bit like Mr. Lynch, the aptly named trade unionist, they wanted to abolish Christmas. At least Mr. Lynch doesn't yet have the law on his side, but they wanted to abolish Christmas. And finally, do you know what we did? We are the only country ever to have reversed a revolution. And the revolution of Cromwell, the revolution of the woke, the Puritans of the 17th century, do you know what? The general public just decided they didn't want them anymore. And we reversed it. And what's also very important, and we forget this, Oliver Cromwell, I was lecturing at Parliament, I was doing an afternoon speech at the weekend, and you enter Parliament past Oliver Cromwell, this great looming statue. He's there, he's the brave Republican, whatever. Do you know what? He had worse relations with Parliament than Charles I, the king that he executed. And not only that, Oliver Cromwell finishes up as an unfettered military dictator who is buried with full royal honours and a crown. That's what revolutions do. We had the courage to undo one. Somehow, We've all got to recover that courage.
We've got the woke takeover of our institutions, and as you said, Parliament's are sort of holding out. But in the end, we've taken so much power away from Parliament to be decisive and to actually run the country. What is your prognosis for the future? I mean, how do we move the dial on?
I'm a historian. Careful.
Well, I know.
I am not a charlatan. Historians
or
who
a snake oil salesman.
Historians who prophesy are charlatans. What I hope is, and it's very striking, whenever you have, as it were, a serious test of public opinion, it actually falls on the right side. And again, I was reading just as I was waiting to come in now, the COVID has been, in effect, more fully banished in Britain than in almost any other country. In France, we're about to go into another lockdown. The Germans have masks. They want to keep it
and the Americans still have vaccine tyranny.
Because depending on which state you're in, you see, they have the advantage of that. But what is striking again, if you actually look at Hancock's COVID diaries, you see as early as the 28th of August 2020, Boris had the right instinct. He knew they were overreacting. He asks actually, very strikingly, he asks Hancock, only 6% of 80-year-olds are only at 6% risk of dying. What are we shutting the country down for? And do you know what? At which point, the entire structure of the BBC, the entire structure of The Guardian, of the mainstream media, practically everybody but GB News, descends on him and said, oh, we can't possibly have that. Led, of course, by Sage. And people have to... What is GB News about? It calls itself populist channel. There has to be this final recovery of confidence. It will only begin with that recovery of confidence. People have to take the risk and speak out. Above all, we've got to try to reconnect MPs properly with their constituents. You see, I think this is what has gone fundamentally wrong. It's that the party structures deliberately separate MPs from their constituents. At the moment, what do MPs do? They just act as glorified social workers. That's not what they are about. They should be properly representing their constituents, their political concerns. Not, does somebody get a council house? Not is
pooing in the park.
Not is little Johnny not getting the right care in the NHS. They are there to represent politically, to carry the concerns of their locality to the centre. That's what's broken down.
And to be a little more autonomous. The mandate they have, I've forgotten what it's called now, but the mandate to make a judgment on behalf of their constituents that may be against the view of their party. The doctor's mandate. Every MP has the doctor's mandate, and it would be nice to see a bit more of that, and a bit less of the three-line whip, and towing the line.
Yes and no. I mean, what has gone wrong is that again, Cameron plays a terrible part in this. The throwing of all power into the organisation of the party, into central office with the Conservative Party.
And we had it with New Labour as well, of course, didn't we? With strict party discipline.
Virtually everything that's gone wrong with this country fundamentally rests with Blair and New Labour. The disastrous devolution, sending Scotland free in the sense of deciding that you were going to dissolve the connection between the Scots and the Westminster
It's like trying to keep my wife loyal to me by offering her...
I wouldn't...
Well, good luck with that. But it's like trying to keep my missus loyal by offering her more lovers. That's what devolution was. Very briefly, because the clock's against us, just in a few seconds, we've got £2.1 trillion worth of national debt. We're running a deficit. We'll probably have that for the next 5 years. NHS waiting list of 7 million people. Illegal migrant crossings up to 1,000 a day, 40,000 a year. And net migration last year of 500,000, population size of Liverpool. Is there a danger that this great country could fall over
Yes.
Do we face an existential threat, whether it's economic or societal?
I think Sherelle Jacobs is fundamentally right. And unless we and our politicians do something about it. Again, this myth of the wonderful NHS. The NHS, I know. You were talking about people of a certain age, you remember at the beginning. I thought, God, he's actually addressing me. When I was a little boy, I was born with club feet. I required a whole series of operations. And do you know how the NHS was run in 1949? By queuing. You turned up and you waited all day. Your time was of no value. That might work in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, a world built on shortage and queuing. It can't work now. We've got to confront the truth. We have a political class that's devoted to lying to us.
And let me tell you, you've obviously sorted out that club foot because you strode into this studio like Fred Astaire.
I didn't do quite a pirouette, but never mind.
No, well, we live in hope. Dr. David Starkey, thank you so much. A privilege to have you in the studio. Lots more ahead. Is the COVID narrative beginning to tumble like a house of cards? I'll speak to a top engineer and number cruncher, Ivor Cummins, who's quite a sensation on YouTube. But next, no-nonsense ex-cop Di Davies on whether we'll ever see an end to woke policing. Plus, he used to look after the Royals, so I'll be asking him whether Lady Susan Hussey is in fact an outrageous racist or not. He knows her well, so we'll get the answer to that next.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Is the COVID cosy consensus beginning to crumble? We'll discuss that with number cruncher Ivor Cummins shortly. But some arresting news for you. The Times newspaper report that diversity roles are now costing the police £10 million a year. with on average each force in England and Wales employing 5 full-time members of staff, that is, on fat salaries to perform such roles. Meanwhile, this morning's Just Stop Oil protesters appear to have been sponsored by the police escort services. Eyewitnesses saw cops laughing and joking with the protesters as hundreds of commuters on their way to work were held up on main roads. Police have said they will only intervene when serious disruption is caused. Reports say annoyed commuters were met with stern words from officers as they followed the protesters slowly behind. It seems that many serving officers didn't get the memo that police chiefs want to get rid of woke policing. Put my next guest in charge. That's what I say. He comes from the golden era of crime prevention, tough love and no nonsense. Former head of Royal Protection and ex-top cop Di Davies. Hi, Di.
Hello, nice to talk to you again.
Great to have you back on the channel and great to have you on this show, Di. Woke policing, clearly these coppers didn't get the message.
No, they certainly did. Well, they would if I was in charge, because obstructing the highway, no matter what Dr. Starkey say, is an offence, has always been an offence. I can remember 50 plus years ago arresting the whole of the Harry Kishner movement because they were blocking Kensington High Street. My goodness, I wouldn't stand for this nonsense. Now newly promoted Assistant Commissioner Twist comes on. I heard him speaking on one channel. He wouldn't inspire me at all. What the public want are fair, firm coppers in charge. And these people are committing what I describe as a public nuisance. And the new law that came out in this year makes it an offence to cause public nuisance to such an extent that we have seen. Now, the Metropolitan Police have been doing this for well over a year, along with their friends from Essex. My goodness, why don't they get a grip? Why is it always the poor unfortunate you and I travelling to work, whether it's on trains, buses or anything else? Why are we can't go on strike, we can't protest to this level, and yet we're expected to tolerate it? I find it intolerable, the lack of police action, and my goodness, I wish I was 20 years younger and somebody would bring me back.
Something seems to have happened to the culture of the British police, Di. We saw that in how cops handled the Extinction Rebellion protests during the lockdowns and the BLM protests as well. It seemed that the police were only willing to get tough with those out campaigning against lockdown themselves. It's like the cops are picking and choosing their preferred causes.
Well, yes, they do, and I'm very sad. I'm very proud to have been a member of the Metropolitan Police, where we were the police under people like Peter Imbert, Lord Imbert, and others, and Stevens. I'm sorry, I just have no faith in this current crop, whether it's the College of Policing. Look, let's deal with some of the issues. They have spent, as I understand it, nearly 13,000 hours of manpower on these so-called demonstrators, who, as far as I'm concerned, not only are committing offences, but those who are aiding and abetting them are committing serious offence of conspiring to cause a public nuisance. The Meta and the CPS appear only to have discovered this because only 8 out of 800 arrests, 200 have been charged. Now, there is a backlog in the courts, but surely we could be fast-tracking this because the people of London deserve it. They don't deserve to have their fire brigades, police and ambulance delayed because of half a dozen people who think they can take the law. When are we going to wake up to reality in this country? God help us.
Are we recruiting the wrong kinds of cops, or is it the culture, or is it policy? What's the problem?
Well, I think it's a combination of both, really. There is a discipline code in the police service or police force. It used to be a force in my day. And there's an ethical code. What I would do to deal with the so-called racism, undoubtedly there has been some awful cases, I would have every officer sign a legal document saying that if you commit an offence under the police discipline code or the ethical code, and there is both, then you will be sacked. No ifs, no buts. But try to get rid of lazy corrupt policemen is a difficult process unless you catch them bang to rights or you get evidence. But we need to shake up the discipline service. But my goodness, we need to shape up some of the leadership. I had the privilege of being chairman of London and the city's Chief Superintendents Association and a national spokesman. In 25 years, I can't remember when some of my colleagues are so badly led. And that's the crux, not so much on the ground floor, although some of them need sorting out. We need to sort out their sergeants and inspectors and get rid of this awful. They spend a huge amount on diversity, £10 million. How many female beaters, how many burglars could be caught with some of this money? My goodness, we need a shake-up, but nobody seems capable of doing it.
Di, I've just got a couple of seconds. Former head of Royal Protection. You know Lady Susan Hussey, who got into hot water for asking an attendee at an event about domestic violence where she really came from. Is she racist, yes or no?
Two things. I don't know her well, but I have met her. No, she is not. And your colleague the other night, Nana, explained far better, eloquently, and took apart the nonsense that has been actually touted by so many bullies. One of my pet hatred and my DNA is hatred of bullies, whether they're black, pink, Japanese, or anything else. I hate bullies. So many of the press, the media, the BBC particularly, aided and abetted by Sky, they have torn this poor woman apart with no credible evidence, and aided again and abetted by the palace, who within 5 hours had bought the line, hook, line and sinker. They should hold their heads out in shame too. She was a wonderful woman, doesn't deserve this after 60 years of service. How dare they treat her like this? And somebody, Prince Philip or Her Majesty, would have never allowed this.
What a loss you are to the British police force. Di Davies, their ex-head of Royal Protection. Well, folks, we've saved our best till last. Very excited about the final part, with shocking data published in the BMJ about vaccine safety, and with a tragic the Strep A child deaths directly linked to lockdowns now. Is the COVID narrative beginning to tumble like a house of cards? I'll speak to a top engineer, number cruncher and YouTube sensation, Ivor Cummins. This guy is hot stuff. See you shortly.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It's been another bad week for the COVID cult. Always got to be careful how I say that word. As the Telegraph report that health officials are admitting the 9 tragic child deaths from strep A, which is a bacterial infection, is directly linked to COVID lockdowns, during which young people were unable to go to school and be exposed to such infections and fight them. Meanwhile, the globally renowned British medical journals published a paper suggesting COVID-19 boosters are likely to cause a net clinical harm to young adults aged 18 to 29, where total severe adverse events will outweigh COVID hospitalisations averted. Put bluntly, according to this paper, young people are far more likely to be harmed from the vaccine than from getting COVID. Based on these findings, to avoid young adults going into hospitalisation from COVID, you'd have to vaccinate 31,000 people, 18 of whom would suffer vaccine side effects. Not a ringing endorsement, is it? Meanwhile, with even the most brainwashed Brits now discarding face masks, and with most accepting the NHS waiting list of 7 million patients is down to a policy of lockdowns that barely moved the COVID dial, is the COVID narrative beginning to crumble? Let's now speak to Ivor Cummins, a man who's made quite a name for himself during the pandemic. He's on YouTube, he's on Twitter, and he is the voice of reason. You can just skip ahead for me if you don't mind, Layla. Thank you so much. Chemical engineer and complex problem-solving analyst. It is Ivor Cummins. Hi, Ivor.
Hey there, Mark. Great to be here.
Great to have you back on the show. It's been far too long since we last spoke. It's a bad week of headlines for COVID. Do you think people are beginning to wake up now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling pleasantly vindicated over the past 6 months as all the data has come in, and Sweden with no lockdowns, no masks, and kids up to 16 in school throughout had one of the lowest mortality excesses in Europe. And that in itself is a case in point of proof. And of course, we have nearly 100 papers published now showing that lockdown has no measurable benefit in COVID outcomes. And of course, we have 40 years of science, and we have the Dan Mass study on COVID for masks showing no benefit, which is unsurprising. So, you know, things are turning around. However, the mass media, sadly, is still pumping out propaganda for whatever reason. We won't get into conspiracy theorists. But yeah, people are waking up because common sense is finally beginning to cut through the mass propaganda and indoctrination of the last couple of years.
I know so many people that are up to date with their vaccines and with the boosters. They're still getting COVID. I can't believe it, Ivor.
It's quite shocking. I had so much hope for that novel drug class, but sadly, it kind of failed. The most important thing was to prevent or to reduce transmission. And sadly, in the summer of 2021, the Israel data from the government in Israel clearly showed that the infection rates were very similar between the vaccinated and non-vaccinated, and they did massive vaccination. So we did know mid-summer 2021 pretty much that there was no real mitigation of transmission that was worthy of real-world respect. So once we knew that, whether it helped you with your own personal health, that is not really relevant to people below 50 who are healthy, because the risks are so stunningly small to that cohort that really there would be no need for a novel drug medication to try and allay that risk. So, I mean, it's all coming out now clear as day.
Yes, I mean, Ivor, do you buy the idea, the narrative that the virus is less of a threat to societies because so many of us are vaccinated? All those celebrities that go on Twitter, they say, I've got COVID for the 10th time, but thank God I've had the booster, otherwise I'd be in the ICU now. Do you buy that argument that COVID's less of a threat because of the vaccine?
Well, I mean, my phrase has always been for 20 years, show me the data, and the data says the exact opposite of that. So in reality, we had COVID, which was a new member of the coronavirus family, or SARS-CoV-2, and we had a first hit that was pretty heavy because there wasn't a whole lot of prior immunity, and then we had a kind of second wave. But obviously, the impact of this new virus was going to rapidly diminish. I likened it in early 2020 to a stone being skipped on a pond. You're going to get hit seasonally, and it's going to rapidly diminish as human immunity in the population grows remarkably. So the vaccine came in, but when you look at the actual data, it's hard to distinguish an effect from the vaccine. And that's just what the data says. So blaming or crediting the vaccine is just inappropriate, because these people who are claiming credit, at the end of the day, they were in a profile where the risk was to have a flu-like effect, and that's what they had. So I'm not sure where the vaccine comes into it.
Ivor's YouTube channel and his podcast are unmissable, as is his Twitter feed. You can find him at The Fat Emperor on all of those platforms. Thanks, Ivor. Catch up soon. Dan Wootton, my broadcasting hero, is next. Hi, Dan.
Mark Dolan, you are unmissable. What a great show. Look, we've got lots coming up tonight. Do you believe, Mark, do you believe that we got the full truth from Harry and Meghan in that trailer yesterday?
It's a pack of lies. Like you said in your show yesterday, it's an act of war, Dan. This guy's thrown his family under the bus and the British people.
Exactly. So we've got Sarah Vine and Paul Burrell on that tonight, plus lots more. Mark, great to see you.
Can't wait. Dan Wootton is next. Don't go anywhere. Britain's best journalist. I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that